Most people believe attracting money is about working harder, finding better investments, or simply getting lucky. Today, we're talking about 12 forbidden statements that attract money like magnets. The kinds of statements that seem to make cash stick to certain people while constantly slipping away from everyone else. But here's the question. Why are these statements forbidden in the first place? Why do they sound so uncomfortable, so unnatural, or even completely wrong to say, despite the fact that they quietly shape the way people earn, save, spend, negotiate, and build wealth? In this video, you'll discover what those 12 forbidden statements are, why they challenge everything most people have been taught to believe about money, success, self-worth, and opportunity, and why they quietly reshape the way you think about wealth. More importantly, you'll understand why they feel so difficult to say, how they quietly shape your financial decisions every single day, and what begins to change when you finally give yourself permission to believe them. Most financial advice teaches you what to do with your money after you've earned it. This video takes a completely different approach. Instead of changing your bank account first, you'll learn how to change the hidden language that shapes every financial decision before it ever becomes a financial result. As these statements begin to replace old patterns, you'll naturally find yourself making stronger financial decisions, setting healthier boundaries, thinking with greater confidence, and seeing opportunities that most people overlook, not because you learned a new financial trick, but because you began thinking like a different person, the kind of person that cash sticks to like crazy. I am worth more than I used to believe. Why does the average person consistently underestimate their own value? Why do talented people settle for lower salaries, stay in unhealthy jobs, or hesitate to charge what they're truly worth? And why do people with less talent often end up making far more money? Because your income rarely rises far above what you believe you're worth. Most people think self-worth is just about confidence. It isn't. It's an invisible financial ceiling. If you believe your value is limited, you'll negotiate less, you'll ask for less, you'll expect less, and over time, you'll quietly receive less. So where did that ceiling come from? Were you born believing you weren't valuable, or did someone teach you that? No one enters the world believing they're worth less than everyone else. Those beliefs are learned, sometimes from criticism, sometimes from comparison, sometimes from rejection, and sometimes from growing up in an environment where playing small felt safer than standing out. Eventually, that borrowed belief becomes your own. Not because it's true, but because you've repeated it long enough to believe it. So if these beliefs were learned, can they actually be changed, or are you stuck with them forever? Absolutely. The moment you begin questioning your old story, you begin changing your financial future. That's why the first forbidden statement isn't, "I'm rich." It isn't, "Money comes easily." It's much simpler. I am worth more than I used to believe. Because the moment your self-worth rises, your standards rise, your decisions rise, your opportunities rise, and eventually, your income has a chance to rise with them. But believing you're valuable isn't enough, because many people secretly believe they're valuable, while still feeling guilty about becoming wealthy. And that's exactly what the next forbidden statement destroys. I deserve to be wealthy. Why does saying, "I deserve to be wealthy," make so many people uncomfortable? Why does it almost sound selfish, greedy, or even arrogant? And why do so many people feel guilty the moment they begin earning more than everyone around them? Because many of us were taught that wanting wealth is something to apologize for. Some people grow up hearing that rich people are greedy. Others are taught that wanting more means you're ungrateful, and some simply believe that struggling is somehow more honorable than succeeding. Over time, those ideas become invisible rules, rules that quietly tell you, you can have enough, but don't have too much. But if part of you believes wealth is wrong, what happens when money finally starts showing up? Do you actually keep it, or do you unknowingly push it away? Your mind always tries to stay consistent with what it believes. If you secretly believe wealthy people are selfish, becoming wealthy creates an identity conflict. You hesitate to negotiate, you undercharge, you overspend, you give away opportunities, not because you don't want money, but because deep down, you don't want to become the kind of person you've been taught to dislike. So does believing you deserve wealth automatically make you wealthy, or is something else happening? No, believing you deserve wealth doesn't magically attract money. It gives you permission to stop pushing it away. That's the real power of this forbidden statement. I deserve to be wealthy. Because the moment you stop feeling guilty about success, you stop sabotaging it. And when you stop sabotaging it, you finally give yourself permission to build it. But even people who believe they deserve wealth still lose enormous amounts of money every single day. Not because they make bad investments, but because they're trying to earn something far more expensive than money. I don't need everyone's approval. What does other people's approval have to do with money? After all, approval isn't currency, so how could wanting people to like you possibly affect your financial future? Because approval is often one of the most expensive things people ever buy. Sometimes they buy it with expensive cars, sometimes with designer clothes, sometimes by saying yes when they desperately want to say no, sometimes by staying quiet instead of asking for the raise they deserve, and sometimes they spend their entire lives becoming the version of themselves that makes everyone else comfortable. Approval isn't free, it always costs something, but why do so many intelligent people keep paying that price, even when they know it's hurting them? Because being accepted feels safe. For thousands of years, being rejected by the group could mean losing protection, resources, or even your life. Your brain still carries that ancient programming. That's why disappointing someone, being misunderstood, or risking criticism can feel far more dangerous than it really is. So instead, people protect their approval and sacrifice their opportunities. So what happens when you stop chasing everyone's approval? Do people suddenly start liking you less? Or does something else begin to happen? The moment you stop needing everyone's approval, your decisions become much clearer. You negotiate with more confidence. You spend less trying to impress people. You stop apologizing for your goals, and you stop shrinking your ambitions just to make someone else comfortable. That's why this forbidden statement is so powerful. I don't need everyone's approval, because the less your self-worth depends on other people's opinions, the more your financial future depends on your own decisions. Have you noticed something? The first 3 forbidden statements had almost nothing to do with money itself. They were about you. Because before your income changes, your identity has to change. If you don't trust yourself, if you don't believe you're worthy, or if you're constantly chasing approval, no financial strategy can overcome those invisible barriers. That's exactly why I created the Confidence Code. It goes far beyond confidence in social situations. It teaches you how to build the kind of self-trust, internal validation, and financial confidence that quietly shapes every decision you make. If you're serious about becoming the kind of person that naturally attracts better financial opportunities, you'll find a link in the description. But even if you've stopped chasing approval, there's one word that still costs people an incredible amount of money, a word that many successful people use effortlessly, but most people are terrified to say. No is a complete sentence. Why is one tiny 2-letter word so difficult for so many people to say? Why do people agree to things they don't want to do, lend money they can't afford to lose, or spend time on things they never wanted in the first place? Because every time you say yes to something, you're automatically saying no to something else. Say yes to an unnecessary purchase, and you're saying no to investing that money. Say yes to someone else's priorities, and you're saying no to your own. Every yes has a hidden cost. Most people never stop long enough to ask what that cost actually is. So why do wealthy people seem so comfortable saying no? Do they simply care less about people, or do they understand something everyone else doesn't? They understand that every decision has an opportunity cost. Time is limited, energy is limited, money is limited. Protecting those resources isn't selfish, it's responsible. People who constantly say yes eventually discover that their calendar, their wallet, and even their emotional energy belong to everyone except themselves. So what happens when you finally become comfortable saying no? Does life become harder, or does it actually become simpler? The moment you realize that no is a complete sentence, you stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for having boundaries. You stop making financial decisions just to avoid disappointing people. And something surprising begins to happen. Your money stays where it's supposed to stay. Your time goes where it matters most. And your opportunities begin multiplying because you're no longer giving them away. That's why this forbidden statement is so powerful. No is a complete sentence. Because every unnecessary yes quietly steals from the future you're trying to build. But if protecting your money were as simple as saying one word, almost everyone would already be financially secure. So what is it that keeps pulling people back into the very habits they promised themselves they'd never repeat? I can say no without feeling guilty. If you already know how to say no, why do so many people still end up saying yes? Why do they agree to lend money, take on responsibilities they never wanted, or constantly put other people's needs ahead of their own? Because for many people, the problem isn't saying no. The problem is surviving the guilt that follows. That guilt feels unbearable, so instead of disappointing someone else, they disappoint themselves. And over time, that pattern quietly becomes expensive, not just emotionally, but financially. But why does guilt have so much power over us? Why does protecting yourself sometimes feel like you've done something wrong? Because many people were taught that being a good person means always being available, always being generous, always saying yes. Somewhere along the way, self-sacrifice became confused with kindness. So every boundary begins to feel selfish, even when it's completely healthy. The result, people give away their time, their energy, and their money, just to avoid feeling guilty. So what happens when guilt no longer controls your decisions? Do you become selfish, or does something completely different happen? The moment you stop treating guilt as a sign you've done something wrong, everything begins to change. You stop making financial decisions just to keep other people comfortable. You stop rescuing people at your own expense. You stop confusing generosity with self-neglect. That's why this forbidden statement matters so much. I can say no without feeling guilty. Because every dollar, every hour, and every opportunity you protect today gives your future self something your present self almost gave away. But even people who have healthy boundaries still fall into one of the most expensive financial traps there is. And the surprising part is, most of them don't even realize they're trapped until the money is already gone. I don't need to look rich to become rich. Why do so many people spend money trying to look wealthy, instead of actually becoming wealthy? Why do expensive cars, designer clothes, and luxury lifestyles attract so many people, even when they can't truly afford them? Because appearances are rewarded immediately. Looking successful earns attention, compliments, status, validation. Actually becoming wealthy usually earns none of those things at first. Real wealth often grows quietly, while fake wealth demands to be seen. So if looking rich feels so rewarding, why doesn't it actually make people wealthy? Because every dollar spent trying to impress people is a dollar that can't grow. Money has two choices. It can work for your image, or it can work for your future. Most people unknowingly choose the first. Wealthy people spend far more time making their money productive than making themselves look successful. So does that mean wealthy people never enjoy nice things? Do they just save every dollar forever? Not at all. The difference isn't whether they buy expensive things, it's when they buy them, and why they buy them. They don't purchase success, they build it. And once wealth becomes real, the need to prove it usually disappears. That's why this forbidden statement matters. I don't need to look rich to become rich, because the moment you stop spending money to create the appearance of wealth, you give your money the opportunity to create the real thing. Have you noticed what's happening? None of these forbidden statements are just changing your finances. They're changing your decisions. But insight alone isn't enough. Real change happens through repetition. That's exactly why I created the Confidence Workbook. It helps you practice these principles until they stop feeling uncomfortable and start becoming automatic. If you're serious about turning these ideas into everyday habits, you'll find it linked in the description. But even people who stop chasing appearances still struggle with something that quietly keeps them financially stuck. And unlike everything we've talked about so far, this one has absolutely nothing to do with money itself. Someone else's success doesn't take mine away. Why do so many people feel discouraged the moment they see someone else succeed? Why does another person's promotion, business, or financial breakthrough sometimes make us question our own future? Because many people unknowingly treat success like it's limited. They believe that if someone else wins, there must be less left for them. But wealth doesn't work that way. Someone else's success isn't evidence that you're falling behind. It's evidence that success is possible. The only thing comparison really steals is your focus. So why does comparison feel so automatic? Why does your mind keep measuring your progress against everyone else's? Because your brain is constantly looking for where you fit. For thousands of years, comparing yourself to the people around you helped determine your place within the group. Today, that same instinct follows you everywhere. Social media, neighborhoods, work, friends. Without realizing it, you stop measuring your progress and start measuring your position. So what changes when you stop treating someone else's success like a threat? You stop asking, why them? And you start asking, what can I learn from them? Envy turns into curiosity. Competition turns into education. Frustration turns into motivation. That's why this forbidden statement matters so much. Someone else's success doesn't take mine away. Because the moment you stop competing with other people's journeys, you finally have enough attention to build your own. But changing the way you see successful people still isn't enough, because there's another belief hiding underneath it, one that quietly convinces millions of people they're permanently locked out of wealth, and until that belief changes, everything else becomes much harder. I can learn what wealthy people know. Why do so many people believe wealthy people have something they'll never have? Is it intelligence, luck, connections, or were they simply born different? And why does that belief stop so many people before they ever begin? Because it's easier to believe wealth is reserved for other people than to admit you still have something to learn. The moment you convince yourself that wealthy people are fundamentally different, you stop paying attention. You stop asking questions, you stop looking for patterns, and eventually, you stop growing. But if wealthy people aren't completely different, what exactly separates them from everyone else? In many cases, it's not that they know everything, it's that they think differently, they ask different questions, they solve different problems, they notice opportunities other people ignore, and like any skill, those ways of thinking can be learned. Knowledge isn't inherited, it's acquired. So what happens when you stop putting wealthy people on a pedestal and start seeing them as people you can learn from? Everything changes. Instead of feeling intimidated, you become curious. Instead of assuming you don't belong, you start paying attention. Instead of saying, "I'll never be like them," you begin asking, "What do they know that I can learn?" That's why this forbidden statement is so powerful. I can learn what wealthy people know. Because the moment you believe wealth is learnable, your mind starts looking for lessons instead of excuses. But believing you can learn from wealthy people still doesn't guarantee you'll ever put yourself in the places where those lessons exist. Because there's one invisible barrier that keeps many people standing just outside the door, without ever realizing they're the ones refusing to walk through it. I belong in rooms where wealth exists. Why do so many people avoid the very places, conversations, and opportunities that could completely change their financial future? Why do they hesitate to walk into expensive neighborhoods, high-end networking events, or rooms filled with successful people? Because many people don't feel like they belong there, not because anyone told them to leave, but because they quietly told themselves they didn't fit in. They assume everyone else is smarter, more successful, more connected, or somehow more deserving. So before anyone has the chance to reject them, they reject themselves. But where does that feeling come from? Why does simply entering certain environments make some people feel so uncomfortable? Because your identity is always trying to protect what's familiar. If you've spent years believing wealth belongs somewhere else, your mind will treat wealthy environments like unfamiliar territory, not because they're dangerous, but because they're different. And whenever your identity feels threatened, your instinct is to retreat back to what's comfortable. So what happens the moment you stop asking, "Do I belong here?" and start believing that you do? You stop shrinking. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop assuming everyone else has something you don't. Instead, you become curious. You start conversations. You ask better questions. You notice opportunities that used to feel invisible. That's why this forbidden statement matters so much. I belong in rooms where wealth exists. Because the moment you stop acting like a visitor, you start thinking like someone who belongs there. If you've made it this far, you've probably realized something. None of these forbidden statements were only about money, they're also about the person you become before money ever changes. That's exactly why the Confidence Code and the Confidence Workbook were designed to work together. One helps you understand the psychology that's been shaping your decisions for years. The other helps you practice those principles until they become second nature. If you're serious about becoming the kind of person who naturally thinks, acts, and decides differently around money, you'll find both linked in the description. But even if you believe you deserve wealth, stop chasing approval, set healthy boundaries, and finally believe you belong. There's still one habit that quietly separates people who build wealth from people who constantly start over, and almost every financial decision comes back to it. I think long-term. Why do so many people earn more money, yet never seem to get any richer? Why do raises, bonuses, and even lottery winners so often end up right back where they started? Because making more money doesn't automatically create wealth. The real difference is how far into the future you're thinking. Most people make financial decisions based on how they'll feel today. Wealthy people are more likely to ask, how will this decision affect me 5, 10, or 20 years from now? The longer your time horizon, the better your financial decisions become. So why is thinking long-term so difficult? If everyone knows patience is important, why don't more people practice it? Because your brain is wired to chase immediate rewards. A purchase today feels real, saving for 10 years doesn't. Your mind naturally values what's in front of you over what's still invisible. That's why so many people sacrifice an extraordinary future for an ordinary present, not because they lack discipline, but because their attention is trapped in the moment. So what changes when you finally begin thinking long-term? Does everything suddenly become easier? Not easier, clearer. Short-term temptations begin losing their power. Impulse purchases become easier to walk away from. Small investments stop feeling insignificant. Daily habits begin making sense. That's why this forbidden statement matters. I think long-term, because every financial decision you make today is quietly introducing you into the person you'll become tomorrow. But even people who think decades ahead still make one critical mistake. They continue treating money like something they have to work for, instead of something that can eventually start working for them. Money is my employee. Why do some people spend their entire lives working for money, while others eventually reach a point where their money begins working for them? What changes? Is it luck, a higher income, or is it something much simpler? The biggest shift isn't how much money they have, it's how they think about it. Most people see money as something they earn, spend, and earn again. Wealthy people eventually begin seeing money as an employee. Every dollar has a job. The question is, what job are you giving it? But how can money possibly work for you? It's just paper or numbers on a screen, isn't it? Money works whenever it creates more value than it costs. It can earn interest, generate dividends, fund a business, purchase assets, or simply save you time by solving problems more efficiently. The goal isn't to collect money. The goal is to give every dollar a purpose that continues creating value long after you've earned it. So what happens when you stop chasing every dollar and start managing every dollar? Your entire relationship with money begins to change. Instead of asking, how can I make more money? You begin asking, how can this money create more value? That's why this forbidden statement matters so much. Money is my employee, because the moment every dollar has a purpose, money stops becoming something you constantly chase, and starts becoming something that quietly works alongside you. But even if your money begins working for you, there's one final mistake that quietly destroys everything we've talked about. Because the moment people finally build wealth, many of them begin attaching something to it that was never meant to be attached in the first place. Money is a tool, not my identity. Why do some people feel successful when their bank account grows, but feel like complete failures the moment it shrinks? Why does money have so much power over the way people see themselves? Because many people unknowingly confuse their net worth with their self-worth. When money becomes your identity, every financial setback feels personal. Every mistake feels like proof that you're failing, and every success becomes something you desperately have to protect. Money was never designed to carry that kind of weight. But if money isn't your identity, then what is it? What role is it actually supposed to play in your life? Money is a tool, nothing more, and nothing less. A hammer isn't valuable because you own it. It's valuable because of what it helps you build. Money works the same way. Its greatest value isn't sitting in your bank account. It's the freedom, the opportunities, the security, and the impact it makes possible. The moment money stops defining you, it starts serving you. So what happens when you finally stop measuring yourself by the size of your bank account? You stop making desperate decisions. You stop chasing money just to prove something. You stop treating every financial setback like it's the end of your story. Instead, you begin making decisions from confidence instead of fear. That's why this final forbidden statement matters more than all the others. Money is a tool, not my identity. Because the moment your identity is no longer attached to money, you're finally free to use money the way it was always meant to be used. Not to determine your value, but to multiply it. So, what were these 12 forbidden statements really about? They weren't magic affirmations, they weren't secret formulas, and they certainly weren't shortcuts to becoming rich. They were psychological permissions. Each one quietly removed a mental barrier that keeps people stuck. One challenged your self-worth, another challenged your need for approval. Others challenged the way you think about boundaries, comparison, time, opportunity, and even money itself. Because long before money changes your life, your thinking changes your money. That's why becoming wealthy isn't just about earning more. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally makes better financial decisions, the kind of person who protects their future instead of sacrificing it, the kind of person who sees opportunities instead of obstacles, and ultimately, the kind of person that cash sticks to like crazy. But here's something that sounds completely backwards. If becoming wealthy is really about making better decisions, why do some of the laziest people almost never seem to go broke? How can doing less sometimes produce better financial results than constantly doing more? It sounds impossible, until you understand the psychology behind it. Click the video on your screen now and I'll show you why lazy people never go broke, and how adopting their way of thinking could completely change the way you build wealth.